Good morning everybody and welcome to my channel. Whether you're old or new, thank you for your support and wishing each and every one of you a grand day rising. Now, last week it was announced in the media that there was at least 40 Labour MPs plus others from the various parties who are pushing for digital ID. Now, of course, this has been bandied around, this threat, for a number of years, but those of us who saw it coming were called crazy conspiracists, right-wing, bigoted, tinfoil hat wearers, and of course now, these months and years on, we are proved right yet again. So I'm just going to go off for a moment and polish my lovely shiny tinfoil hat. Now, who exactly, do you ask yourself, is this really for? What benefit is it really for? Now, I must ask at this point, what policy does this really represent, and is it really for our safety and well-being, or is it something more sinister perhaps? If we are either British born and bred, for example, or whether we now have citizenship status, if we migrated here, whether it be for work or a relationship or persecution or to study, we will have a passport, which is ID. We may have a driving license, which is ID, and we may have other forms of ID, which have always been perfectly fine. Do we really need protecting from ourselves, one wonders, or is there something bigger at play here? This is what we need to ask ourselves. And they go on, well, this is going to be streamlined and that's going to be streamlined, but there are implications too with that. And I will leave you to form your own conclusions or delve a bit more. Now, also the other day I saw briefly in the media, before the story disappeared in the ethers, about airports becoming biometric, so you have to show your face. I mean, all these things are open to corruption, are they not? We have seen increasingly cases where people's IDs have been stolen or their other personal details, and this is on the rise. So how do we know that it's watertight, and does all that data really get disarmed once it has been given to these companies and individuals? They say things like, oh, the data's not stored, blah de blah, but how do we know? They're saying it, but without proof, how do we know whether it is true? Now, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Kath, who has sent me some very interesting information. I'm going to kind of refer to it on screen, so apologies if I periodically turn my head away. It's because I'm reading from my screen. Now then, the first thing I would like to draw your attention to is an article from Dr Mike Yeadon on the Digital Control Network. This is split into 3 parts. It's on his Substack. I'll put the link up to his Substack in case any of you want to go and have a look and see for yourselves. It starts off with a meme, which I will also share with you. I'm not going to discuss it. You can look at the image yourself. So this Substack post is in 3 parts. And he also commends a gentleman called Nigel Watson and his direct style of speak. If you don't know Nigel Watson, he happens to be on YouTube, and I will put a link to his YouTube in this video. Nigel Watson makes short videos which are hard-hitting, and I've watched many of them. They're pithy, straight to the point. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. And he also shares why the authorities are so set on imposing digital ID. Dr Mike Yeadon points out, as he has previously, that we already have adequate means to directly identify ourselves, as I have also explained, to whoever requires it. So we don't need a new form of ID. In fact, it is they who want these IDs, who want us to turn ourselves into a QR code at the touch of a phone, for example, in order that they can control every aspect of our life. Now, you may have heard that in socialist China, they have a social credit score, and digital IDs are attached to this. Please do feel free to go off and do your own research, and you will find all manner of interesting articles about this. These new digital ID symptoms are editable in real time because the details within your ID aren't in the ID itself, but on a central database, as I have already explained. Your QR code simply directs the inquiry to the source. That means any changes made to it are in real time and visible to the next inquiry, and so on and so forth. Is that something you really want? Do you want everything about yourself exposed, perhaps, to the dark web? I mean, the crimes, as I've said, are becoming increasingly frequent, whether it's your ID or your other personal details, including health data as well. You see, there's another thing. Our surgery down the road has recently taken up the Anima system, where you must apply to speak to a doctor online, and they have taken away any person-to-person way of making an appointment through the receptionists. The idea is that you send your details through the Anima application, and then somebody will triage you and then decide who it's best for you to see. Now, I'm sorry, but I won't be doing any such thing. Not on your Nelly. There's not a chance. I think it was a couple of years ago now, Palantir won a major NHS contract. Now, if you don't know anything about Palantir, they are a major data gathering firm headed by Peter Thiel. And one asks, or should ask, and one ought to ask, what would a data gathering company want with our personal data? And there's a pressure group called Just Treatment, and that's just one of them. There's others as well who are opposing this because it can potentially open up a whole can of worms. And I have done various things myself to ensure as far as possible that I don't comply with any of this. I guess it's down to just how much you value your data. But let's treat this whole subject as a story, just for the purposes of the internet. Let's just use this scenario as a story. We're all in a matrix, and all our interactions and everything else is one story in a large pool of stories. We live in a world of multiple timelines, and timelines are not necessarily straight. I believe some of us are capable of moving through the multi-dimensional sphere, but that's a whole other story. How do we know that everything we are seeing is actually there? It could be a hologram, perhaps, but that too is perhaps another story. Anyway, without wanting to go on at too much of a tangent, if you are invited to sign up and you don't like it, you may be wise to decline. And if it is still imposed, refuse to use it. If it's not used, there's no money in it. Remember, a lot of so-called schemes are there for the ka-ching, ka-ching. It's about power, money and control. It is a transaction you must not agree to. If the perpetrators succeed in getting this widely accepted, we are in trouble. Just remember that, it's really important. So I support, for example, the cash is king scheme. So I pay cash for everything as far as I possibly can. Use it or lose it. And in fact, in recent times, more people than ever before are using cash again. Now, during the global incident, people were told they couldn't use cash because of the germs. It was card only, and this is how they tried to sneak it in through the back door. Fortunately, there was enough pushback for it not to be more imposed, and people have gradually got back to doing things the way they used to, although some have been programmed and will never go back to being the same free person that they were before the global incident. But each person must learn the consequences and implications for themselves. So if you're concerned, perhaps talk to other people. Ask them, float it. How do they feel? Do they know anything about it even? You'll be surprised how many people do not, because the media, through various signals, monitors and rations what news is brought out into the open. Most people may not accept that it's about digital totalitarian control, again because of programming, or the explanation for why it is happening is made to seem reasonable. But there's at least some of us who can see that this could well be abused. And one way it could be abused is being hacked by criminals. And nobody wants that to happen, except of course for the criminals themselves. The worry, for one thing, is that cashless CBDC plus digital ID and your free life is over for good. You're not going to get that back again. It's going to be very difficult once legislation is brought out to backtrack. Would you really want to show your ID before every single transaction is made? How would that affect your life if it was? How would that affect your life if you had no choice? And what about the idea that digital ID must be valid in order to pass muster and allow the transaction? I'll share the screenshot of this. And then what if your ID is only valid if you're up to date with the World Health Organization recommended injectables? So do you see how dangerous this path is becoming? And especially if we don't push back. And what happens to the perpetrators? What do they need to do in order to get there? It seems to be quite simple for them when people just go along with it, doesn't it? One of the Labour MPs who signed the letter in favour of digital IDs, Jake Richards, said, "The truth is we're moving to an era of digital ID, but only in their minds at the moment." What's going through your mind? That is the question. That's what he told the BBC. Well, we know a few stories about the BBC. If you don't yet know stories about the BBC, then perhaps you might like to do a bit of research into the various stories of the BBC. Since when were we able to trust politicians when it seems that even during the global incident they were out feathering their own nests and certainly had their own mixed bag of rules, which were not the same ones as we were expected to go along with? There's a lady called Catherine Austin Fitz who has often talked about what she calls the central bank warfare model of control over economics. Having the status of the world's reserve currency, almost all commodities are priced and settled in US dollars. The USA can print almost unlimited amounts of money, which is then used, among other things, to fund a military industrial complex, and in turn that's used to subjugate any opposition to their global policy of domination. Now, in the 1960s, Britain never had it so good, and as it was claimed, and of course during those times the currencies were all pegged against the dollar, and then came the stock market crash in America, which rippled out to all economies. So we all went into recession, and then we know about the 1970s with power cuts and the winter of discontent and so forth. This is all extreme capitalism. It goes beyond the normal capitalist model and goes into quite another direction. The additional element I had simply not realised until recently is that these policies aren't even intended to serve the needs of the USA, only its stock of billionaires. As of 1913, with the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank, the USA has suffered a form of invisible coup d'etat in which the military power of the USA has been harnessed to accomplish whatever its stakeholders desire. Building on this concept, the central bank warfare model has, of 2020, been turned upon its own citizens, one could argue, with far greater intensity than at any previous time, and this inversion is occurring everywhere in the West. In the third part of Dr Mike Yeadon's post, he speaks about another excellent article by ESC Key. It's a long read, but charts the formation of the Bank for International Settlements, BIS, a shadowy private organisation based in Basel, which is not only beyond democratic control, but beyond all but the most unified political influence. Anybody who doesn't know where Basel is, it's Switzerland. The police may not search their premises or employees, similar to diplomats. They pay no taxes. Their headquarters agreement with the Swiss government is, to Dr Mike Yeadon's eyes, an appallingly one-sided document. He says, I know my assessments of their role in the pincer movement on ordinary people will be viewed by many as black-pilled, but my short post shows how few are the steps required to seize remote control of everything. Denial of this eventuality is to me Pollyanna-ish. Nothing benign characterises recent years. So show me where my logic fails. Absolutely. Now then, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I had the pleasure of seeing Dr Mike Yeadon speak lengthily at a rally in Canterbury against 15-minute cities. If you get the opportunity to hear Mike Yeadon, to meet him, or even if you care to look online and peruse his material or hear any of his podcasts, then I would strongly recommend it. To me, he makes a lot of sense, but again, that's just my view and my story. So I could go on, but I won't here. What is your story? What are your ideas? What do you think? How does your narrative play out? Do you even have a narrative? Have you thought about a narrative? Let me know with either your thoughts or comments or observations. Thanks so much for watching, and please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you again soon for the next one. And until then, bye for now.